and welcome to the Okotoks Museum and Archives. My name is Coutts. I'm the Museum and Archives Specialist. And today I'm going to take you on a tour of the Okotoks Museum and Archives. I'd first like to acknowledge that the land that the Museum and Archive is located on is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of the Piikani, the Kainai, and the Siksika First Nations. It is also home to the Stoney Nakoda, consisting of the Chiniki, the Wesley, and Bearspaw Nations, as well as the Dene of Tsuut'ina, and it is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. The Indigenous community has a great tradition of sharing stories, and really that is what the Museum and Archives does as well, sharing stories of our community's history to the residents of Okotoks. The museum is housed in a beautiful 1905 home. It has seen numerous owners over the years and lots of changes, but one thing that hasn't changed is the beautiful character and hominess of the building. So I'll first maybe start our tour with a little bit of history of the building itself. Some of you may be surprised to learn that the building was not located on the location where it is now at 49 North Railway Street. It was originally located at the corner of Elizabeth Street and what is now Northridge Drive, at one point Highway 2A. When the highway was widening in the year 2000, it stood in the way, and so it was either bulldoze it or relocate it. And so the community rallied at that point and raised the funds to move it to this location, and it's been a museum ever since. Back when it was on Elizabeth Street, the property was originally owned by 5 gentlemen: William Livingston, John Lynham, Josiah Pugh, and Alex and Hugh Patterson. When the house was built in 1905, it was William Livingston who lived in the house. All of the other entrepreneurs, those other 4 individuals, had homes of their own. So William Livingston lived in the house until 1909, when the property was sold to Fanny Spencer. She stayed briefly in the house and then rented the house to Corporal Angerman and his wife in 1915, when it served as headquarters for the Royal Northwest Mounted Police in Okotoks. So I imagine that at some point we had some culprits stay in the cells in this house. Oh, if walls could talk. So following its service as the Northwest Mounted Police headquarters, George and Sarah Welch owned the home the longest, from 1919 to 1942. George was the mayor of Okotoks for 2 terms and also managed 2 grain elevators in town. So it really was probably the envy of the community, the home where the Welches lived. The Welches moved back to Ontario in 1926 and retained ownership and rented the house to several families. The next owners were Alice Marie and Joe Miller, who owned it from 1942 to 1950. Alice Marie was well known for her formal Easter teas, as the house was one of the few that could accommodate a large crowd. And those teas were often held in the living room and the dining room of the house. So you can just picture in your mind little card tables and ladies in fancy Easter bonnets gathering for an Easter tea. Since the 50s, the house has been owned or occupied by numerous families, including a druggist, a laborer, a livestock dealer, a salesman, and a geologist. It's also been used as a daycare center and an antique emporium. Many people come through the house remembering when they went here when it was a daycare, and have lots of memories climbing up and down the stairs. From 1989 until its restoration in 2000, the house contained the law office of Charles Dickson and members of Parliament Ken Hughes and Grant Hill, and the Okotoks office of MLA Don Tanis. We have quite a bit of history that's on display in the museum about the history of the house, and currently it's located in the hallway. So the Okotoks Museum and Archives mission is to share the stories of Okotoks, inspiring people to connect to their community and the environment. And our collection's mandate is to collect and preserve artifacts and archival records of permanent value to the history of Okotoks and district. So this museum chronicles the history of Okotoks and has been very grateful to the Okotoks community for receiving wonderful artifacts and archival documents, which form the basis of all of the exhibits that we do in the museum. The museum's storage is located in the basement. The basement is a purpose-built storage facility when the museum established here in 2000. So half of the storage is for our archival collection, and the archives consists of town records as well as family and individual records and organizations. The other half of the storage is where we store our artifacts, and they're all organized into what they are made of. So paper is stored in one area, textiles, metals, wood, glass, and we have a few plastics. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. The museum has several different exhibits on at any given time. There's so many stories to tell and so many artifacts to display that we have to change the exhibits quite regularly. Our current exhibits include Okotoks and the Roaring Twenties. So this exhibit chronicles what Okotoks was like during the Roaring Twenties. The 1920s seemed like a fabulous year, and we wanted to celebrate and recognize that 100 years later. So this exhibit features some wonderful photographs from our archives that show what Okotoks was like. We also have several artifacts of what people wore, what people listened to, what people read, what games they played. So it really tries to capture what Okotoks was like. If only we could go back in time just for a day or a week and witness what clearly was a wild and wonderful decade, one of change, one of fun. The prohibition was over, and so there seemed to be a lot more freedom. And so that exhibit, or this exhibit, tries to capture that mood. So for the most part, this room is often used as the kitchen, although in the original blueprint of the house, this was the dining room. When the museum became a public building in the year 2000, the original kitchen was lost when we put in a wheelchair accessible bathroom. So this dining room turned into our kitchen for exhibit purposes. And the reason it often stays as a kitchen exhibit is we have a wonderful 900-pound gas stove, which is pretty hard to move. And so we design our exhibit around that stove. It was a gift from ATCO Gas in 2012 to honor the 100th anniversary of when gas came to Okotoks. So this kitchen exhibit has some wonderful artifacts. We've got a cream separator. We have almost everything an early home would have at the present time geared toward that 1920s. In the 1920s, people were still using sad irons. They were still having manual washing machines, still using a Singer's sewing machine. One of the interesting things that we've put into the 1920s exhibit is just how old some of our favorite candies are. And this is a great hit with kids. For example, the O. Henry bar is from the 1920s, Pez from the 1920s, and also gummy bears, Reese's Pieces. And so kids, I think, get a kick out of the fact that some of their favorite candies date back to the 1920s. So as I mentioned, there's been lots of renovations to this building, but there are some elements that are original. So we still have some heat vents, cold air returns that are original. Some of the window frames, like in this corner of the living room, still original. Some of the baseboards are original, but some of them are reproductions, and we've tried to match what is new to what is old, so it blends together. Unfortunately, we've never seen or come across interior pictures of this house from the early days. Love to be able to get hands on some of those pictures to show exactly what it was like. We did a fair bit of renovations in the year 2009, which included adding wallpaper and a picture rail. The picture rail is a beautiful addition to the house for a couple of reasons. It saves us having to put nails in the walls, and the exterior walls are still lath and plaster. And I think it also adds to the character and charm of the house. Their wood floors are from the 1950s and 60s, and these floors are put on top of the original floors. There's a couple places in the house that the original floor is still visible, and I'll show you that. So I'm standing in what was the original master bedroom, a beautiful room with its own walkout balcony. It must have been just a beautiful room for a master bedroom. Currently, it's used as our schoolroom exhibit. At the present time, it's featuring one-room schools of the Okotoks area. So there were several rural schools around Okotoks from the 1880s through to the 1940s, before all of the schools closed and students from the countryside were bused into the town school. So this schoolroom is somewhat permanent, although the theme within that schoolroom changes. Right now it's one-room schools, but we've also used the room for exhibits on the Okotoks Lower School as well as the Okotoks Upper School. Currently on display on the second floor is an exhibit called Love Stories of the Foothills. It celebrates love and marriage and features a number of local stories of how people met, how they fell in love, what their wedding was like, where they went on their honeymoon. It also features and explains some of those wedding traditions. For example, Why do we toss the bouquet? Why do we toss the garter? What's the history of the ring? Why are there bridesmaids in a bridal party? So that is all answered in this exhibit. This exhibit also features some extraordinary wedding dresses and bridesmaids' dresses. One of the oldest in our collection is the one donated by the descendants of the Wyndham family. This is actually a dress that came in during COVID. We discovered that many people during COVID spent their time cleaning and purging items from their home. So as a result, the museum received a number of wonderful donations, including this beautiful bridesmaid's dress. It was worn by Beatrice Wyndham in 1897 at one of the first weddings that was ever held in Okotoks. At that time, it was the village of Okotoks. We also have a stunning purple velvet wedding dress, which was just remarkable, very stylish. Clearly, in the 1920s, anything went. Women were breaking away from tradition and going with what they wanted as a wedding dress. So this is just a stunning dress. We also have another dress from the 1930s, a satin dress, as well as Dr. Ardeal's wife, Gertrude, her wedding dress. It's a beautiful satin dress. It is showing a bit of deterioration, so we have it just laid in this plinth to protect it. So this current exhibit is up until the end of August, and it will be replaced by another exhibit on fun and games. So I'm looking forward to putting that exhibit together. Also on the second floor is a small exhibit recognizing our Indigenous heritage, particularly the history of St. Joseph's Dunbow Residential School, which was located northeast of Okotoks. It includes photographs of the school, as well as what has been done on site to honor the children who went to school there and are buried there. The exhibit also includes the documentary Little Moccasins. It was produced in 2014 and it runs on a loop in the exhibit. Part of the exhibit also includes some of the shoes that were placed at the Municipal Center in 2021 following the discovery of the 115 children who were found in unmarked graves in Kamloops. Some of the shoes from the memorial at the Okotoks Municipal Center were relocated here so that when the memorial came down, the conversation could still continue, that it wasn't forgotten, and that the children who were found in those unmarked graves were also not forgotten. The third floor in the museum, or the attic, is where our education classroom is. Come on up. So our education classroom space is where our education programmer, Jamie Brett-Syme, conducts a wonderful array of school programs. So it's a blank space for programming. But we have a hidden gem up here in the attic, and it's our children's playhouse. It's a great place for kids to come to the museum and have fun, a great introduction to a museum. There is dress-up clothes that they can try on, toys to play with that don't require batteries, just fun, creative play, unstructured, and it is open free of charge anytime that the museum is open. So we've had families, grandparents bring their children to enjoy just some unstructured play. We also are stocked with a variety of books, some lovely stories from the past, as well as more modern ones of acceptance and other cultures. So thank you for joining us. We hope to see you in person.